Hi, everyone, by the way. I'm Milka. I am Barbara's colleague. I'm starting full-time at Creative Disruptors very soon. So looks like everyone. Good morning.
Awesome. Great to have you
Nice
on,
to meet
Milka.
you face to
That
face
way,
too.
if something happens to my internet, Milka can just step right in and can finish the thing.
Yep. Let's hope that doesn't happen, but
That's my other assistant.
I can't figure out why I'm on here twice.
Somebody may have used your link. All right, I think we've got some participants in. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started today. It's 11 a.m. on Tuesday. We're ready for another one of our sessions. We call it Business as Unusual, as things have changed in the world dynamically for all of us. We know so many of our entrepreneurs and small businesses are out there still pushing through and trying to make things work. And so we've got a great session today, webinar sponsored by MACED, and we're grateful to have them as a partner, not only in this, but in our ongoing work. So really thankful for that. And they've got a great speaker lined up today from Creative Disruptors. Her name is Barbara Wyckoff. We're going to have an introduction of her in a moment. So we're glad to have you out. Just a bit of housekeeping for today. There's going to be time for questions at the end. So if you could, as we're getting started here and during the presentation, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little button that says Q&A. So if you could put your questions in there, that would be great. Type those questions in. And you'll also be able to comment on other questions and do an upvote. So give it a thumbs up. And so if we have a lot of questions, if you can just give a thumbs up to the ones so we can kind of prioritize, what everybody would like to hear answered the most, we'll try to prioritize those and get those knocked out after the presentation. If we have time, we may open up the mics and allow you to raise your hands. If you've got comments, suggestions, you just raise your hand and we'll do it that way. Otherwise, if you've got questions, there's also the chat feature. And if you're streaming, if you're catching this on Facebook, we'd invite you to go ahead and share it, like it, comment, question there. We'll try to capture those questions and bring them into Barbara if we have time. So I'm going to turn it over now to Ketiki. She works with MACED and leads their consulting and technical assistance team. We're grateful to have her here with us today, and she's going to introduce our speaker today. So Ketiki.
Hi, everyone. I am really excited to be able to introduce Barbara Wyckoff. She's been working with MACED for many, many years, and I've been working with her pretty closely for the last several years. Every time I have a conversation with Barbara, I leave really inspired. She has a lot of insights and a lot of really interesting, critical questions. Her approach to working with businesses is that rather than examining a bottom line or trying to find efficiencies by nitpicking a budget, she helps enterprises by listening, asking questions, and offering a bigger picture systems-minded approach. She is an entrepreneur herself. She knows how to balance purpose with getting the work done. And as a co-founder of Creative Disruptors, she works with social, civic, and business entrepreneurs and teams to evaluate their purpose and core competencies, reimagine their potential impact, and build the systems, relationships, and management to execute the plan. She's a certified co-active coach from the Coaches Training Institute and has been an executive coach for over a decade. And she's also trained as an organizational and relationship systems coach and has been a facilitator and speaker for over 20 years. So I'm thrilled that she's here. I think she has this is going to be a really interesting discussion. And Barbara, welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Kediki. I really appreciate it. And I'm also here today with my colleague, Milka Lopez. She's going to be taking some notes, and I've learned with all of this new webinar and virtual training, etc., always have a backup. Don't go yourself. Don't go alone. So Milka is one of the many backups that we have. So I appreciate her being here. So our agenda for about the next 35 minutes is, first I want to talk about seeing the change moment, and I offer a framework for how we're going to see this moment that we're in right now. And then the first step is stabilizing your business. Particularly, I know people are worried about cash flow, but if we stop there, we're going to be in trouble. We actually have to start pivoting our businesses, and we have to be able to see those opportunities for pivoting. And I've got a bunch of stories and examples in there. And then how do we actually do the pivoting, and how do we plan for the new normal or the normal? And it's an iterative process. And then hopefully we'll have 15 minutes or so at the end for questions. So that is our agenda for today. So seeing the change moment. I love this. There is no going back, right? This image for me captures the pandemic right here. I recently had a big change in my life, and I was talking to someone, and they said, you know, your molecules in your body have just exploded into 100 different directions, 100 million different directions. And slowly but surely your molecules do come back, but they never come back the same way they were before. They come back in a different arrangement, a different structure. And I think about that as where we are. In less than 3 months, our molecules have flown apart, and they're going to come back for sure, but they're going to come back in a different way. So some of the things we already know are going to happen. Anything crowd related, restaurants, crowd entertainment, sports, is going to drastically decrease, at least for the next 18 months until there's some kind of vaccine. There's going to be we're going to have a lot fewer visitors from away, and we're going to have a lot more home-based or close to home recreation happening. Grocery store, we've already seen grocery stores, delivery services, locally grown food, family entertainment. I heard the other day there's a run on puzzles, no doubt. Puzzles and game boards. What are we doing? We're home, we're doing home entertainment. We're going to keep doing that again for quite a while. We also are going to have, this came up on the call the other day, I thought was so interesting, reduced local and state revenue. I think New York State is looking at, I think it's billions that they're going to be missing in revenue in 6 months. And so we have to start thinking about that. When we open the country, we already know we'll find ourselves with lower levels of consumer confidence, right? And people aren't going to be spending the way they were spending before. There'll be less investment available for our businesses. And as everyone already has seen, many markets have moved online. And then, you know, the pandemic has affected our supply chains, and it's shrunk global markets, and it's reduced consumerism. And I think this is why we see this great moment actually for local food, for locally produced products, because they're available, they're sourced from home, we trust them, they're not coming from overseas. So that whole idea of shortening the supply chain. And one, you know, that I think is really interesting is, I was just talking about this morning, was the whole idea that we're going to start seeing more people moving into rural communities from the cities. And the question will be, do we want them to come? And what will we do with them when they get here? But all those urban residents have figured out how to work remotely. And suddenly this is opening up a door where it's like, well, I can move to rural communities and work from there. And I think that's going to be something we have to manage. What exactly we want that to look like. But those are some of the things, some of the changes that I foresee and have been thinking about. So I wanted to introduce this idea of red zones and green zones. In the red zone, this is sort of the reactive, the emergency mindset. It's where we are right now. And thank goodness we're here. We're assisting our neighbors, we're stabilizing our businesses, and we're practicing social distancing and other things. But this is like the immediate moment. The green zone is much more the proactive mindset. It's a connection to our passions and our goals, and it allows us to actually continue our business and our work after the emergency. And I think the real trick about looking at this is that we have to be in both of these places as once as businesses. Certainly, we're trying not to lay off people, or we're looking for our paycheck protection program or whatever in the red zone. But if we stay in the red zone and think that somehow things are going to go back to the way they were, then we're actually not going to be ready to survive after this immediate downturn right now. So for us to be able to continue, we need to get into our green zone for us to be sustainable. I like this emergency, right? The root word of the word emergency is emerge. And I think it's really, that's what we're talking about, is how do we respond in an emergency, but in a way that we're able to emerge and into the new reality, whatever that is. I wish I had a crystal ball, but we do see some trends already. So that's the point about pivoting. Right here for me, it's in this word. We want to stabilize and then emerge from that, and looking different than we first went in. So again, now more than ever, the ideal is to be able to balance the two, the red zone and the green zone, and not just be consumed by the red zone. So I'm just curious, oops, sorry. I don't know if everyone's muted, or maybe you just want to put it in the chat box and then someone can just read what's in the chat box, but which zone do you feel in? Are you all in the red zone, or are you starting to move into the green zone? What do we see in the chat box?
Yep, guys, you can put that in the chat box, or if you'd like to share verbally, just raise your
Yeah,
hand and I'll unmute you.
And again, there's no wrong answers. There's nothing wrong about being in the red zone, but it is about how do we try to find some kind of balance between the two.
Ashley Bledsoe.
Hello. Here at Taco Holler, you said there's a red zone and a green zone, but do we have a yellow?
Oh, great.
Because we're kind of just making it. I mean, we're not in a bad place, but we're not in a good place. But we're in a place where as soon as things open, we can transition straight in. The only thing that we don't have right now is overhead where we're mobile.
That's great, Ashley. And I know we'll be able to talk more about Taco Holler, particularly in the Q&A part. But I think I'm going to hazard a guess you're in your green zone, because you might be missing some things, but you are so connected with your passion and your goals around serving your community and being of use that you've already started, and we'll hear more about it later, but you've already started to pivot your business in a way that honors your goals and your passions and where you want to go. And so that for me is what being in the green zone is. It's like you might be missing oven mitts or whatever, but you've made that shift to honoring your desires in your business. So, all right, so I'm going to keep moving. So the first thing, if you're in the red zone, one of the first things that happens is you need to stabilize your business. And I threw this in here because I think it's really important. There's some critical things, that you can do to manage your cash flow. Okay. Sorry about that. So of course, the first thing is the CARES Act and the Small Business Relief Program. Yeah? Okay. Is the CARES Act. And so I'm not going to go into this at all. I know everybody's been looking at the Payment Protection Program and other things in the CARES Act. So that is definitely one thing, but I also wanted it to be really clear that this is a program that stabilizes your business. The world is changing. There's no going back. If you only do this, if you only do the Payment Protection Program, you will not survive on the other side, because you have to think about pivoting your business to respond to what the changes are happening because of the pandemic. So I kind of put this up here to pressure everybody a little bit to think about, how do I move beyond the CARES Act? That it's not just, oh, I'll make it for 10 weeks and then everything will be back to normal. For all those reasons in the beginning, I said it wouldn't be back to normal. So when we talk about increasing cash flow, it often does not equal increasing profitability, which I think is just important, because in fact, in some ways, you're even maybe reducing profitability. You'll hear by some of the things I suggest, but it means decreasing the investments you've made into profitability. Like, you're going to reduce bulk buying. You're going to reduce your assets. You're going to maybe even sell inventory at a discount price, because that's what's going to get you cash flow. We know that's not the way to increase profitability. So I just wanted to show that those two did not go together. So what are some things you can do to increase cash flow? In other words, to stabilize your business. You want to increase your income, right? So you can do that in really several ways. You can do online sales. You can do cash on delivery. You can maybe do some gift cards, pre-sell products. Those are all ways to increase income in the short term, or increase your cash flow. You can increase your margins. You can reduce waste. You can maybe negotiate lower costs with some of your suppliers. You can focus on your most valuable product. If there's a product that has a significantly high margin, you can focus on moving that to market instead of something that has a lower margin. And you can improve labor productivity. I just heard about a business I thought was great. It's a food delivery business, and they now are offering lunch free for all the workers, just to help boost morale and to really reward people that are putting their life on the lines. You can increase the accounts payable. In other words, the amount of money that people owe you, you actually start getting that in, right? So you're not increasing what people owe you, you're increasing how much people are paying you. So that's accounts payable. And you can negotiate longer payment terms. You can decrease your cash payments, right? You could actually negotiate reduced rent. I've seen a lot of people, MACED included, who've said, we'll forgive interest for the next couple of months. So you're able to increase cash flow by not having to pay us interest. This is the one. You can increase the amount of money that you get in that people owe you. Keep track of it, remind them, don't have so many outstanding bills. And then you can sell your assets. You can sell your inventory at a discount. You can sell your inventory. Maybe there's a piece of machinery or something you haven't been using. So that's another way to increase cash flow. And then I think one thing that's really interesting is you can actually increase your equity investments in your business, right? So you can crowdfunding. That's pre-selling product, but you can actually raise investment that way in your business. You can even, perhaps you want to sell some shares in your business as a way to increase cash flow. But by and large, it's about decreasing your cash expenses. And you don't want to, like, for example, you probably don't want to buy things in bulk, right? You don't want a lot of inventory unless you can buy them. I've seen a couple of places where 5 or 6 businesses have gotten together and are buying in bulk together as a way to reduce their individual inventory and increase their cash flow. So these are all ideas. I'm sure you've got a lot of ideas too. You know, probably the most important part is maintaining strong relationships with your suppliers and with your markets and your customers. Those are going to be the people that are going to stand by you during this whole pandemic and will work with you to be able to increase cash flow, to be able to stabilize your business. But this is a now thing. So I didn't know if anyone had any ideas about steps they had taken to stabilize their business and manage their cash flow. You can put it in the chat box or someone will unmute you. In addition to applying to the CARES Act. Well, hopefully you've gotten some good ideas, and I know if you talk to another business person, a mentor, they'll have other ideas about how to stabilize your cash flow. So once you've stabilized your business and you've increased your cash flow, hopefully, and you've got some things on settling down, you want to be able to pivot your business and you want to be able to spot the opportunities. So this is a basketball player, and this basketball player is here for a reason. When I looked it up in the dictionary and thought a lot about this word pivoting your business, what really struck me was when a basketball player pivots on the floor, I don't know if any of you played basketball, one foot stays in position, and then you swivel or turn on that foot, you pivot on that foot, and your other foot is able to guide the ball and go in a different direction. So the whole notion is you didn't pick up both feet and run to the other end of the court. You kept one foot stationary and then you pivoted around that point. And I think this is important because, yes, some people very much will find this the time to start a new business. They might just, even without thinking about it, close down what they're currently doing and start something else that's very responsive to the situation. And in some ways, it's really, it's great, and it's great to see those new businesses, but you actually think differently about that than you would think about pivoting your business. Because when you pivot your business, a lot of things stay the same, and then some things change versus changing everything. So I just wanted to put it out there because if you were going to change your business, you might need to think through your finances again and your logistics, and you'd probably think about your demand and your customers, and basically you'd put together maybe a business model canvas or some other tool to ask yourself all those business planning questions. When we pivot a business, we don't ask all those questions. We ask many of them, but we've still got one foot on the ground. So that's as much as I know about basketball. I never played basketball. So here we have the red zone, person sort of walking, and then we've got the pivot with the green zone. So when we are, so when we're pivoting our business, this is when we want it to be sustainable and long lasting, and we need to change some parts of it. And here are 7 things that you could possibly modify or do to pivot your business. You could change your supply chain. You could build new partnerships. You could modify your project. You could do price adjustments or rethink your whole pricing. You could adjust your delivery system. You could reach out to new customers, and maybe you could change your marketing strategy. So we're gonna look at these all in examples. But the important thing is that your green zone, that's your pivot foot. Your green zone, your goals, your desires, your passions, those are what stays the same. But you're given the new reality we talked about, you're going to have to change some of these things that are indicated with the arrows. All right, so I'm going to tell some stories now, which I do much better at. So this story is, these won't be too long. So I work, Milka and I have worked with a group of cut and sew manufacturers in Appalachian, North Carolina. And they were sewing everything from quilts to clothes, really of the apparel business, t-shirts, etc. So then the pandemic hit. And of course they saw overnight the demand for their clothing, the orders weren't coming in. They have several people that are employed. They were going to have to lay these folks off. And then they said, well, so what are the skills that we have? How can we keep our employees working and build on their skills? So they decided they would make PPE, personal protective equipment. So you can see that over on the right. Those are those like blue things that everyone wears at the hospital, which were in very short supply or are still in short supply in this country. And so they said, we have skills in sewing. So they needed to, first thing they had to do was learn a brand new supply chain, right? They didn't know, like, where do you get that blue fabric or whatever that stuff is? And, you know, they had to change their supply chain. They worked with new partners they'd never worked with before to get some of the designs, and so they could cut and sew according to a pattern. They had to get the pattern. So they modified their product. And then their delivery system, they had new customers. They had to be talking to hospitals and healthcare workers and organizations. So they had to change several of these pieces, but they built on their skills. They knew how to cut and sew. They knew how to package. They knew how to distribute. They could use all their distribution channels they had used before. So they could use the same distribution channels, but they had to rethink pricing and market. And they really haven't had to do any marketing. They just had to tell people they were out there doing this. So they've been able to pivot their business. At some point, they may go back to sewing t-shirts. We'll have to see, but certainly for the next 12 to 18 months, they'll be sewing, these companies working together will be sewing the PPEs. And they did, just one quick last point is when they explore, because they're a number of companies collaborating, they were able to figure out the supply chain and then share that information with everyone. So they didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Each company didn't reinvent the wheel. They shared the supply chain. They actually have bought material in bulk together. So each company doesn't have a huge inventory, but is able to be much more flexible and nimble and actually increase their cash flow by reducing some of their inventory. So, so that's that story. Then I want to tell you about another business in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know it's an urban example, but it's still related. So they are a food delivery business. And they've actually grown over 400% in the last month. So while they're sure to maintain many of their customers in the short to medium term, they're already thinking about how do we hold some of these customers. I know they're not going to hold all of them because many of them have come because of the pandemic, but how do they hold some of these customers in the longer term? And so they decided they would change their marketing strategy. So what I mean by that is they now market themselves as friends of restaurants and bars. So they recognize that they're gaining the customers who shifted from their local restaurants, which are all closed and are now cooking at home, that they've been able to, that's who their customer base is people who value their restaurants and bars. So they've done that, they've changed their marketing in a couple of different ways. First of all, the 20 new people they've employed are all unemployed in the last month from restaurants, local restaurants. And they make a point of that. They're like, this is what we're doing. We're picking up those folks. They also have enough access to food because they're picking up a lot of the food and supply chains that were going into the restaurants. They're now going into the food delivery business. And then they've even gone so far to offer a box of vegetables. So a customer pays $15, and what you're doing is subsidizing basically a box of vegetables that goes free to unemployed restaurant workers. So they've also got a social impact piece here, which is to care for and support unemployed people from the restaurant business. So they've changed their marketing strategy, but the other thing that they've done that's really interesting is they've formed new partnerships. And they've even formed a partnership with a brewery, which might not fit for everybody, but they do online. You go online to order your food. You can, in another week, you'll be able to go online and order your beer, which will also be distributed along with your food that you've gotten through their whole online grocery store. So if you desire, that's available. But it's making it possible for that brewery to continue hiring the people it was hiring in the past because they can see the sales is going to come from that. So a little closer to home, this is Princeton, West Virginia. So this is a music school, which you can imagine could no longer offer in-person classes. And so within 1 week, the director changed to online instruction, right? So we've got, I love this, we've got the in-person, and then we're closed, and now she's studying her guitar in front of the computer. But one thing that happened that was really, while this was in response to the coronavirus and the need to practice social distancing, what the director found was that a lot of parents were really welcomed this whole online instruction. So in a rural community where people can drive half an hour, 45 minutes for their kid to have a half-hour music lesson, parents were like, this is great. I don't have to drive an hour and a half for this music lesson. So the school has maintained 90% of the students, and actually the director doubts that she'll go back to teaching all of her classes face-to-face in the future. She'll probably combine some face-to-face with the online instruction because it has been met so positively by the parents and the kids, and everyone's learning their music. And then I'm just going to tell one more. So this is, I wanted just to include a nonprofit story because I don't know if there's anyone on the phone that has a social enterprise that might be using a nonprofit structure. But this one is in Charleston, West Virginia. And this organization provided in-depth community coaching services over literally 1 to 2 years. Like they really would settle in for a long-term relationship. It had a lot of face-to-face meetings that were involved in this whole model. You worked with a team, a community team over the 2 years. So when they were in the red zone, they knew they had to shift day-long meetings to shorter virtual meetings, right? Because they could no longer have the face-to-face meetings. But then when they started to think about their green zone, when they started to think about what was their goal and what were they trying to achieve, they knew they had to think about community coaching in a different way. To do community coaching with 2 years, same set of people, very, very in-depth with just a few communities, wasn't going to get rural West Virginia through the pandemic and out the other side. So they're still working out details, but they plan to move to less intensive coaching and be able to do it in more communities. They realize they have to work in more communities than the few, and that means they have to be less intensive. And they also want to support self-organizing. So rather than a team that is the same group of people meeting after meeting, they're actually going to work more with what's bubbling up, because we've seen so much action and people taking control over their communities and being able to support their communities on the ground, that they want to keep supporting that over time. So again, that's just sort of a different story, but it's a pivot that involves new partnerships, new ways of doing things, but always rooted in their green zone. And then during the break, we already heard a little bit from Ashley, but we're going to hear about how Taco Holler has done their pivoting. I love your logo, by the way. So we'll hear about them during the question and answer. So those are just some examples. And I want to go back to like, have you think about how these businesses illustrated the 7 primary ways to pivot your business. So I'll remind you of what those are. Don't worry, you don't have to try to remember. But the first one was changing your supply chain. That was one of the ways to pivot your business. So did any of those stories, which stories sort of illustrated changing your supply chain as a way to be sure that you were sustainable in the longer term? I can give you a hint, there's 2. There's 2 examples. Are people typing in the chat box?
No, people are not typing in the chat box.
Type in the chat box, you guys, or else raise your hand.
Raise your hand. I'm also just going to go ahead and allow everyone to unmute yourself if you'd like to say
Okay.
something. I'm working my way through the list right now, so.
One person responded in the chat box, the apparel company.
Yeah, they had to completely change, you know, their pivot was completely changing their supply chain. And then one that we see a lot, it was in the Philadelphia grocer, the delivery one, but we see a lot of people starting to buy more local foods and really tapping into shortening that supply chain. Turnrow in West Virginia has seen a huge increase in their business, and they only sell West Virginia products. So really that buying closer to home is something that we see more of. How about building new partnerships? There's a good one there.
We got Amy Williams has her hand raised. I'm going to unmute you, Amy, if you'd like to share something.
Oh, yeah, I was going to answer the previous question.
Good, go for it. That's fine.
No, I was gonna say the delivery, the food delivery.
Yeah. As long as you're unmuted, how about building new partnerships? Do you remember the food delivery people? Who did they partner with?
Well, they were going to start to offer beer. Oh, they were partnering with the restaurants and bars.
Yeah, definitely. And then the brewery, right? Delivering the beer. That was helping to keep the brewery open. How about modifying your product? Like the way that we do things.
Ashley's written in the chat box that offering new services.
Yeah. So like that, the nonprofit in Charleston, changing how they do their community coaching and offering new services. And then Taco Holler is also offering new services in terms of offering sort of a buying service, right, and a delivery service. I think also modifying your product. A lot of people are going online, right? The music school is now offering those virtual music classes. So that's another one. And that related to that is adjusting the delivery system, right? So now it's delivered virtually as opposed to face-to-face. How about reaching out to new customers? Who was reaching out to any new customers?
I know a lot of y'all on this call are quite talkative, so jump right in.
Yeah, everybody should be able to unmute yourself at this point, unless you've called in. That's a little more difficult.
The apparel company was totally switched their customer.
Yeah, they're now reaching out. Their people in the medical profession are their new customers. Exactly, that's right. I think that's really true. How about the changing your marketing strategy? Who changed their marketing strategy in those stories?
So we've got a hand raised.
What do they
Yeah.
say?
Are you there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Doug Kratis. I run a recovery coaching. I'm a recovery coach.
Mm-hmm.
These times I've noticed I've had to get on a lot of webinars to increase my knowledge in recovery. I haven't been able to reach out to the community because it's a newborn program. I mean, I've been in recovery for 34 years, but it's a newborn to this community here locally here in Pikeville. But to keep it short is to communicate. I've had to really focus in on the business sense, in a sense that I can reach out to people locally, but I can't foresee helping somebody in the meetings. A lot of the meetings I have are Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, and Celebrate Recovery, but they've basically gotten rid of or suspended those groups. So I've had to reach out just basically with using the computer as a resource, like a home-based business, to help people. And that's hard to do. You feel like you're that sense of you're no longer alone. But now I'm here at my house and I feel like I'm alone, but I have to communicate with those of in need. And that's been a challenge, because usually you can go face to face and you can really get a lot accomplished, but now it's on a computer age.
Yeah.
It's good comments, Doug. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. So, so how do we actually, those are just the 7 different things to look at, but how do we actually pivot our business? So the first is to go back to, what is our goal? Where are we headed and what are we trying to achieve, right? So those are all green zone questions. But we need to have a clear sight line of where we're headed. And then we ask 4 core questions. So we think about all those things, the supply chain, the marketing strategy, the new customers, pricing, distribution, and we then ask, so what are our current priorities, the ones that are still relevant from before, but might need to be modified? What are some of our emerging priorities, or ones that were on the back burner but now have to be moved to the front? What are the items that need to be paused and resumed later? And what are the things that are unknown, or the world is in too much flux to decide right now, and we have to have more data and talk to others or let the dust settle before we can decide? So those are sort of the key questions to be able to prioritize and figure out. When you think about supply, like going back to the apparel company, right? The particular fabric that they were using in their supply chain, the customers they had, those things have all been paused and hopefully will be resumed later, but they're on pause. And instead, they've got new emerging priorities. They weren't even on the back burner. They were brand new. Like, how do we make personal protective equipment? And how do we get the patterns? And how do we do that? They're still building on their skills that they have. So I think those are all the key questions. I know for the delivery business, the ones that were still relevant and even more relevant is sourcing local food from local farmers. They did that before, and now they're doing it even more. And they've had to modify their systems to be able to meet the increase in demand. So I've included some examples that are growth, but still require pivot. They couldn't just keep doing things the way they were. And then there's some things that they had to, other businesses changed completely and were able to do virtual or whatever, like Doug was talking about. So for this one, It says, what are some of the ideas you have for pivoting your business? And I'd love, Ashley, for you to share with us what you've done at Taco Holler here, and what was your pivot, and what's been the result?
Okay, so Taco Holler is a food truck, and we also have a lot of catering services that we offer. And
can you turn the volume up?
Yeah, we're having a hard time hearing you, Ashley.
Hold on. Let me close some things. Make some things smaller. Okay, can you hear me better now?
A little bit. You may just have to speak up.
Okay.
Just yell at the computer.
Okay, I yell at the computer. I'm using a headset, but it may be dodgy. So Taco Holler is a food truck and catering service, and we normally cater from the convention center that I work at full time. That's part-time. That's my real job. Taco Holler's my dream. So when the convention center closed down, we had a lot of catering that were canceled. Our town normally has a kickoff for the spring season called Harlan Cows Down, and that is normally what gets us started in the springtime is the Harlan Cows Down. Well, that was canceled also because of COVID, and so we've had no kickoff to the season. Now, we can still set up and serve as a food truck vendor as long as we allow proper spacing for the customers. But we figured we would just wait and see what would happen. We decided to go with grocery delivery. When I was laid off from my regular job, it opened up my schedule exponentially. So with all that free time, I was thinking, well, why not deliver groceries? Because where we are a small town, there is no curbside or shopping services offered. You see where Kroger's and Food City and Walmart have all of those personal shopping services where people will shop for you and then bring it out to your car. Well, none of those are available in Harlan. And so the day after I got laid off, I put up the ad for the personal shopping service where I go out and you give me your list and I buy everything that I can find on your list, and then I pay for it with my credit card, and then you pay me upon delivery. Right now, we only shop for 4 families. One of those reasons is because 2 weeks after we rolled out our model, our local community action service that services the elderly and the disabled, they received a grant to be able to service that vulnerable market. So that interrupted our service a little bit, but we also have no confirmed cases in Harlan County. If we had confirmed cases, I do believe more people would utilize our service because they would be more intimidated to go out themselves. But we're going to continue doing this as long as it's needed, and then as soon as we're able to pick back up on catering, we're just going to switch back over and discontinue the service.
So Ashley, I have a question for you. Did you think about, thinking back to that basketball player with one foot, in your current business and then the other foot pivoting around, going in any number of directions? Did you think about, in addition to doing the personal shopping, offering prepared food that you could then deliver to people's homes, or even like a meal service? You can get 2 meals, 3 meals, we'll prepare it. You can put one in the freezer or take one to your mom or whatever. I mean, sort of that catering, but curbside catering or something. I don't know what it would be, but that's that's kind of a pivot that builds on that, on your food truck, right? Or even drive up, we'll come to your neighborhood and everybody has to keep 6 feet apart, but we'll prepare 3 dishes, people can come and get it or whatever. So I don't know if you thought about that as a pivot.
Ashley, I also had, before you answer that, I just had a thought to try, make sure your headset's all the way plugged into your computer. Sometimes if it's not pushed in all the way, it'll give that distant sound.
It's
Just,
Bluetooth.
oh, I see. Never mind. Sorry. Go on.
It's okay. That's totally not your fault. So we did a catering at the beginning when everything shut down. We did it for NCHC. We were paid by one of the doctors to provide their employees with meals. So we have delivered food since then, but not on a personal level. I try not to deliver to people's homes. We've always delivered to downtown businesses and places that we knew were safe, because some people are just dodgy, and we try to maintain the safety of our employees, and that employee now being just me. So I haven't really thought about distributing to individuals. Now, I have had people ask me for meal planning, where I cook an entire meal and drop it off to like a family of four, and things like that. But I haven't had anybody reach out to me since we started about meal planning, because people are afraid of eating out. I know there's a big push for people to still visit restaurants, but there are a lot of people that are afraid that their food's going to be contaminated. And so we've got limited feedback from people in the community.
Yeah, which is great. We want to open us up for some questions here, but I think that's a great example of where you would probably need to adjust your marketing strategy to include the education about COVID-19 is not in food. And everything you do, I know that group in Philadelphia, they've got everyone online. They show you everyone's wearing gloves and masks, and they have to be really careful. But it actually isn't transferred in food. But that's part of that marketing thing. That's where you might have to pivot that, as well as your delivery. So in your case, it might be delivery service. How you reach your customers, it's going to be marketing, and maybe some different customers too. So all things to think about. So thank you for sharing that. So just to wrap up really quickly, the last part is planning for the new normal, and it's an iterative process. So you need to make a plan and be willing to make changes. You really need to understand your numbers and your logistics, because as you pivot, as you do new things, it's going to affect your bottom line, and it's going to affect your logistics, and it's going to affect your social impact that you have in your communities. So you'll have to be thinking of those three things: numbers, logistics, and impact. And then you're going to take some steps, and you're going to look at your numbers and your logistics and your impact, and you're going to have to pivot again. And it's just an iterative process. There's no, pivoting is not about figuring something out and then just doing that for the next years. It's about an ongoing learning process. So that taking steps and pivoting again. Because the only thing we really know is that there's no going back. We are not going back to where we were at the end of 2019. There's too many things have changed, and some for the good and some for the not so good, but we really aren't going to go back to the way things were, at least not in the next 12 to 24 months. And then my question I wanted to just leave with everybody is, do you have a plan? Do you have a plan for your pivot? Do you know, have you, go back, think about those 7 things that can be changed. Think about your goals, your green zone, where you're headed, and then think about the plan about what are the things you have to do to stabilize your business and now, the things you need to do in the medium term, and the things you need to do in the long term. But you want a plan, and then you want the tools to be able to track your finances, your logistics, and your impact. So we're here to help. Creative Disruptors is obviously available, but also I think MACED is here to help. I'm sure Betsy has a couple of things she wants to talk about, services maybe who MACED is and what you offer.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. MACED is working to support a transition to a new economy in Eastern Kentucky. And one of the ways we do that is through offering business support services. Ketiki Bhattacharya is on the call. She is one of the panelists here. And, we're trying to be creative given, limited resources to figure out how we can be of help to you. So Kediki is available. We'll be sending out her contact information, and you can be in touch with her. MACED is also a lender, so we're a business lender. So if you're needing some help to get you through this time, feel free to reach out to us. Barbara, I'll hand it back to you.
Great. So we do have a couple, we've got 5 minutes or so for questions and discussion. And then Jared's going to tell us like how to find all this stuff later, the PowerPoint and everything. But is there any questions that are jumping out for anybody? You can put them in the chat box or raise your hand or just speak up. I'm not sure which one.
You can unmute yourself. You can type it in the Q&A, or you can type it in the chat. We'll find it if you have a question.
Yeah, I've got a question. So my husband and I have a leather business, and we do sell on Etsy and over social media. And one of our big things that we get excited for each spring and summer and fall and winter is our markets. So we had some really great markets that we were excited about, some bigger ones that we had applied and gotten accepted to, but they're trying to hold out hope, I think, that they're still going to be open. So in order to prepare for those, we had to build up inventory so we wouldn't be caught, a couple weeks before scrambling. And so now we have a lot of inventory, but not a lot of people purchasing on our social media. And so I was just wondering about that. Like, we have a market at the beginning of June that's still saying, yeah, we're going to happen. But I kind of like what Barbara was saying with, this isn't the same. This is a different normal for the next 12 to 24 months. So I don't see these markets happening. So I just would wonder what you guys would suggest for those situations. Do you hold out hope and keep inventory, or try to sell what you have at a discount, or yeah?
Yeah, so, I mean, I know other people have ideas, but what comes to me is I probably would try to even do, see what would happen if you did a crowdfunding campaign, something that you could go back to all those previous customers you had and then actually use your inventory. Basically crowdfunding is a way to pre-sell, or in your case, sell items, right? Because you're like, this level of donation, you get this, you get a belt, or you get whatever it is. And that might be something, and same with gift cards would be another thing that might be useful. I'd also be curious, I'm not 100% sure that market won't happen in June. It will just happen very much smaller, because the capacity of people that can, if you're keeping 6 feet apart, the capacity of people that can fit into that space would be a lot less. They're talking about opening restaurants at 20% capacity, because that's what's needed to keep everyone 6 feet apart. So that could happen that way. But I'd be curious if they're thinking about doing an online market, having all their vendors for a day put their their stuff online, and it's called the same thing, but it's virtual. That could be something that could be interesting.
All right, I think we are approaching the end here. You got one pretty open-ended question. Any ideas on new businesses to be started, homegrown foods, what's hot, what's trending? You want to take one quick stab at that, Barbara, and then we'll wrap it up?
Sure. Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Any ideas on new businesses to be started? What's hot, what's trending?
Yeah. So the first thing is going to be your core human needs: food, health, right? Things that people have to have, because we're going to have so much less disposable income. We're going to have unemployment, everything else. So people aren't going to be buying luxury goods. They're going to be buying the basics. So you want to definitely focus on those kinds of things. I think anything that is homebound, like the puzzles, the board games. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot more music played in living rooms. So maybe there's some kind of recording or something, but so all those things. And then I just would say anything that shortens the supply chain. We already see every country, it's not just the United States, but we're turning inward and we're shortening the supply chain. So whatever you can add value to from your local community, like maybe it's maple syrup or there's some other things that it's value added. Value added is where you find your margin. Just selling vegetables, unfortunately, doesn't make any money for anybody, but adding value, canning, preparing, and I think, I'm almost done, I think we also see a really big resurgence in people having their own gardens and things like that. So I think it's really, I just know in West Virginia, they have a seed, the extension program has a seed distribution program. And last year, 200 people got seeds, free seeds from extension. This year they had to close it at 5,000 people. Like people are growing their own food, but they don't know what to do with it. How do you store it? How do you can it? That's a lost art in many places. So even being able to think about how do you do that? Either it's like a butcher, but it's not a butcher, it's a canning company, or it's lessons, or it's buying things in bulk and you have an annual membership of $25, and that means you can get in on the bulk order of jars, or there's different ways to think about the services you provide along with the products that you provide. So that would be my off the top of my head.
That was good stuff. Good stuff. Thanks so much, Barbara. Thanks so much, Betsy and Kitiki. We appreciate MACED's partnership, sponsorship of today. You saw some links in the chat, but how to get a hold of MACED's team. I'll share this website if you want to find the archives of this. We'll have this recording up, probably up by the end of today. We also streamed it on Facebook, so if you go to our Facebook, you can find it there. But thereisafuture.org, talking about there's a future in Appalachia, /business as unusual, or you can just click this tab up here. And you can find our upcoming events from many of our partners and what's coming up. And you can also find past events. So we've done Google Analytics with BitSource. We've done digital marketing with Holler Creative. BBoss Online's information is there. We've done things on unemployment. If you're an employer, we have the state, deputy director that's managing all the new unemployment regulations, did a whole hour with him on that. All those are videoed PowerPoint slides, notes are all in these past events. This one will be there by the end of today. And we'd also love to hear about your story. If your business is doing something creative, there's a place on here you can submit to share your story. Josh Ball on our team, he's on here as a panel. I was going to have him talk kind of at length about that, but we're here 2 minutes over, so we're going to wrap it up. But you can submit your story there, and we'll get it out to the network of outreach. We've also got a team that really just refers you to the right resource partners, and MACED is one of those strong partners. These are some of the stories, and these are our partners that help put this whole Business as Unusual series together. And that's the world we're in, business as unusual. I think it speaks to exactly what Barbara said. We all hit the red the first day, right? And I think as everybody, the comments we heard today, people were saying yellow, maybe a little green. We're moving into that green zone, and that's what we wanted to do with this this initiative, was say we're going to come out of this. Things are going to be different, but we want to be as strong or stronger. So that's what all these resources are for. Barbara's was right, hit the nail on the head today and helping with that. So thankful for her content. We appreciate you. And I'll say what I always say, the best thing you can do for the future of Appalachia is grow your business. Be innovative, be resourceful, and grow your business. And we appreciate you doing that. This whole team, our team, MACED, we're all in this together. We'll help you move the needle. So reach out if you need anything. Otherwise, keep track of the website, find the resources you need, and keep on keeping on. We appreciate you. Have a good day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.